The UES Meridian approached Nexus Prime for the second time in 30 days, but the view from the bridge was very different now. 50 Zephyrian warships surrounded the station in perfect formation, their crystal hulls gleaming with deadly energy. Each ship was larger than anything in Earth's fleet and bristled with weapons that could reduce planets to space dust. Captain Jake Morrison stood calmly on the bridge, but his hands trembled slightly as he gripped the command chair. Hidden in the cargo bay, 7 temporal archers waited in specially shielded compartments that would prevent alien sensors from detecting their quantum weapons. Everything depended on maintaining the illusion that Earth was coming to surrender. Dr. Lisa Grant monitored alien communications and reported that the Zephyrians were broadcasting the ceremony across the galaxy. Dozens of alien species would witness humanity's submission to the Empire. It was meant to be a lesson about what happened to primitive species who thought they could resist advanced civilizations. Commander Rick Hayes checked the ship's internal sensors one final time. The temporal archers were invisible to normal detection methods, but he worried that Zephyrian technology might be more sophisticated than Earth understood. If they were discovered before the demonstration began, the plan would fail completely. Marcus Webb lay in his hiding compartment and felt the temporal bow's neural interface connecting with his thoughts. Even powered down, the weapon created strange sensations in his mind. He could sense probability streams flowing around, the ship like invisible rivers carrying possible futures toward unknown destinations. In the compartment, next to him, Susan Clark controlled her breathing and tried to stay calm. The neural feedback from her bow made her feel slightly disconnected from normal reality. Sometimes she thought she could see a few seconds into the future, or catch glimpses of events that might happen if they succeeded or failed. High Commander Vextar waited in the same ceremonial chamber where humanity had first been offered vassalage. The tall crystalline alien glowed with satisfaction as he prepared to accept Earth's surrender. Around him stood representatives from a dozen allied species, who had come to witness the Empire's latest acquisition. The chamber had been decorated for the occasion with displays showing human weapons and technology. Zephyrian guards held captured rifles and pistols like museum pieces. A primitive wooden bow sat in a place of honor as an example of how backward human civilization truly was. When the Meridian docked and Captain Morrison's delegation entered the chamber, Vextar began the ceremony immediately. He wanted the galaxy to see that resistance to the Empire was futile, and that primitive species would always submit to superior force. Captain Morrison. Vextar's musical voice carried across the chamber. Have you brought your species' answer to our generous offer? Jake stepped forward and tried to project confidence he didn't feel. High Commander, we have given your offer careful consideration. Humanity has indeed learned much from our first meeting. Excellent, Vextar replied. Then you accept vassalage under the Empire and agree to serve us faithfully for 200 years. We have learned that our understanding of the universe was limited, Jake said carefully. Our weapons and technology seemed primitive compared to yours. The assembled aliens made sounds of agreement and approval. Several species that had faced similar choices nodded knowingly. They had all learned the same lesson about accepting their proper place in the galactic hierarchy. Your honesty is refreshing, Vextar said. Most primitive species waste time with futile resistance before accepting reality. You are wise to recognize your limitations. Jake signaled toward the cargo bay and the hidden archers began moving into position. They used service corridors and maintenance shafts to reach predetermined locations around the ceremonial chamber. Each archer carried a temporal bow and enough quantum arrows for multiple shots. However, Jake continued, we would like to demonstrate our new understanding of human primitive weapons. Perhaps it would amuse your guests to see how completely we have abandoned such foolish tools. Vextar's crystal skin flashed with pleased colors. An excellent idea. Show the galaxy how primitive human weapons compare to real technology. Marcus Webb emerged from a side entrance carrying his temporal bow. The weapon looked exactly like the ancient wooden longbow displayed among the captured human artifacts. None of the watching aliens suspected that it contained quantum processors and temporal manipulation systems. The alien audience erupted in the wind chime laughter that had humiliated humanity 30 days earlier. Several species pointed at Marcus and made comments in their own languages that clearly indicated amusement. One creature that looked like a walking tree shook its silver branches in what might have been alien mirth. Behold the pinnacle of human military technology, Vextar announced to his guests. A wooden stick and a piece of string. No wonder they require our protection from the dangers of the galaxy. High Commander Vextar activated his personal shields to demonstrate the futility of primitive weapons. Energy crackled around his body, creating an impenetrable barrier that could deflect any known form of matter or energy. The shield technology had protected Zephyrian forces for thousands of years and had never been breached by conventional weapons. "Fire your primitive arrow, human," Vexatar commanded. "Let the galaxy see how useless your ancient weapons are against modern defenses." Marcus drew the first temporal arrow and felt the neural interface connecting his mind to quantum probability calculations. The bow hummed with barely audible energy as it prepared to fire a projectile that existed in temporal superposition. Around the chamber, the hidden archers took aim at their own targets. The watching aliens continued to laugh and make jokes about human backwardness. They had no idea they were about to witness the birth of a completely new form of warfare that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. Marcus released the arrow and watched it disappear into quantum phase space. For a moment, nothing happened, and the aliens laughed even harder, thinking the primitive weapon had simply misfired. Then reality bent around High Commander Vextar as the temporal arrow reappeared. The arrow passed through the energy shield like it didn't exist and materialized inside Vextar's body before phasing back out and embedding itself in the wall behind him. The alien commander's personal shields flickered and died as every piece of technology he carried suffered catastrophic failure. The chamber fell silent as the implications of what they had witnessed began to sink in. A primitive human arrow had bypassed the most advanced defensive technology in the known galaxy. The weapon had somehow existed outside normal space-time until the exact moment it needed to strike its target. Vextar staggered backward as his communication devices, weapon systems, and even his translation equipment shut down completely. The temporal arrow had aged his technology by centuries in microseconds, causing failures that would be impossible to repair. He tried to speak, but his voice amplifier had been destroyed along with everything else. Marcus drew a second arrow, and the other hidden archers revealed themselves around the chamber. Susan Clark appeared near the ceiling, having used service ducts to reach an impossible firing angle. Tony Rodriguez emerged from behind a decorative pillar with his bow already drawn and ready. "Allow me to explain how this works," Marcus said as quantum energy crackled around his arrow tip. "These weapons don't exist in normal space-time until they reach their targets. Your shields are designed to deflect matter and energy that exist in the present moment." He fired the second arrow at a Zephyrian guard who had raised his plasma rifle. The temporal projectile appeared inside the alien's weapon and destroyed its power core from within. The guard dropped the useless device and backed away in fear. "But our arrows travel through probability space," Marcus continued. "They exist in multiple timelines simultaneously until quantum observation collapses them into reality at precisely the right moment and location." Susan Clark fired at a massive war machine that had been brought into the chamber as a demonstration of Zephyrian power. Her arrow appeared inside its central processor, and the entire system shut down instantly. Sparks flew from every control panel as decades of technological advancement became worthless scrap metal. The other archers demonstrated the weapon's capabilities by firing at targets throughout the chamber. Arrows appeared inside sealed containers, penetrated force fields, and struck objects that were completely hidden from normal sight. Each shot proved that human primitive weapons had evolved far beyond what any alien civilization had imagined possible. The assembled alien dignitaries watched in stunned silence as their understanding of technological superiority crumbled around them. Species that had ruled the galaxy for millennia suddenly found themselves staring at weapons they couldn't comprehend or defend against. "High Commander." Vextar finally managed to speak without his technological amplifiers. His voice was weak and filled with disbelief. "How is this possible? Your species was using stone tools when we were traveling between stars." Marcus Webb smiled grimly as he prepared another arrow. "That's exactly why it's possible. We never forgot that sometimes the old ways work better than the new ones." Major Susan Clark felt her heart racing as she stepped up to the firing line. The temporal bow felt heavier than any weapon she had ever held, and the neural interface headset made her scalp tingle with strange sensations. Around her 6 other military volunteers waited their turn to attempt what Marcus Webb had made look easy. 3 weeks had passed since the first successful Test and humanity had only 9 days left to respond to the Zephyrian ultimatum. The crash program to create more temporal bows and train new archers had pushed everyone to their limits. Elena Rodriguez watched nervously from the observation booth as Susan drew the quantum arrow. The young pilot had excellent reflexes and years of experience with advanced weapons systems, but temporal archery required something different. It needed an almost mystical connection between mind and target that couldn't be taught through normal training methods. Susan focused on the moving target downrange and tried to clear her thoughts the way Marcus had taught her. Instead of thinking about the physics, she let her instincts take over. The neural interface responded to her brainwaves and began calculating probability paths through space and time. She released the arrow and watched it disappear into quantum superposition. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the target exploded as the arrow materialized inside its center, having bypassed 3 layers of steel plating and an electromagnetic field. Direct hit, called Dr. Kevin Murphy from his monitoring station. The arrow appeared exactly where it needed to be with perfect timing. Susan staggered backward as the mental feedback from the neural link hit her. It felt like someone had filled her head with electricity and bright lights. Marcus caught her arm and helped her stay upright. "The disorientation gets easier with practice," he said. "But it never completely goes away. Each shot takes something out of you." The next archer was Staff Sergeant Tony Rodriguez, who happened to be Elena's younger brother. Tony had been a competitive archer in college before joining the military, and Elena had specifically requested him for the program. Family connections aside, he had the steady nerves needed for the demanding training. Tony's first shot missed completely. The arrow appeared 50 meters to the left of the target and buried itself in a concrete wall. His second attempt was closer but still wide of the mark. On his third try, something clicked and the arrow found its target with deadly precision. "It's like learning to ride a bicycle," Tony said afterward. "Once your brain figures out how to interface with the quantum system, it becomes natural." Dr. Amy Foster had been working with each archer individually to help them understand the mental aspects of temporal archery. Traditional archery required patience and instinct rather than complex calculations. The same principles applied to shooting arrows through time and space. "Don't overthink the process," she told Corporal Lisa Patterson, who was struggling with the targeting system. "Your subconscious mind can process the quantum probabilities faster than any computer. Trust your instincts." Lisa closed her eyes and drew the bow without looking at the target. She let her mind reach out through the neural interface to feel the shape of possible futures. When she released the arrow, it appeared inside a moving vehicle that had been completely hidden behind a building. The training continued around the clock with each successful archer teaching the next group of volunteers. But the process was taking its toll. Several volunteers suffered severe headaches and disorientation that lasted for hours. One archer collapsed during training and had to be hospitalized for neural exhaustion. Elena worked frantically to solve the power consumption problem. Each temporal arrow required massive amounts of energy to maintain quantum coherence. The facility's generators were already running at maximum capacity, and they would need portable power sources for any real combat situation. Kevin Murphy had been developing smaller quantum batteries that could store enough energy for multiple shots. The batteries were dangerous and unstable, but they were the only option for making the bows truly portable. "We're basically strapping controlled fusion reactors to medieval weapons," Kevin said as he calibrated the latest power pack. "If these things malfunction, they could level several city blocks." General Cross visited the facility again with only 6 days remaining until the deadline. The demonstration he witnessed was both impressive and terrifying. 7 archers fired simultaneously at targets scattered across a wide area. All 7 arrows found their marks despite obstacles and electronic jamming. But the general could see the strain on the archers' faces. Susan Clark had a nosebleed after her shot, and Tony Rodriguez needed help walking off the firing line. The weapon was effective, but it was clearly taking a heavy toll on the people using it. "What's the maximum number of shots each archer can fire in combat?" General Cross asked Elena. "We don't know," she admitted. "In testing, we've limited each person to 5 shots per day to avoid permanent neural damage. But in a real fight, they might need to exceed those limits." Amy Foster had been thinking about the tactical implications of the temporal bows. These aren't weapons for extended battles. They're precision instruments for critical moments. 7 perfect shots might be all we need if we use them wisely. Marcus Webb had become the unofficial leader of the archer team. His experience and natural ability with the temporal bow made him the best instructor for the other volunteers. But even he was feeling the effects of repeated neural interface use. "I'm starting to see quantum probability streams even when I'm not using the bow," he told Elena during a private meeting. "Sometimes I can sense multiple timelines overlapping in normal conversation. It's like the neural interface is rewiring my brain." Elena was worried about the long-term effects, but they didn't have time for proper medical studies. "Are you still able to use the weapon effectively?" "Better than ever," Marcus replied. "But I'm not sure what this is doing to my mind." None of us are. The final week of training focused on combat scenarios and team coordination. The archers practiced firing through shields around obstacles and at targets that existed in different temporal phases. They learned to coordinate their shots so that multiple arrows could arrive at the same target from different timeline probabilities. Dr. Kevin Murphy perfected the portable power systems just in time. Each archer would carry a quantum battery pack that could provide energy for up to 10 shots. The batteries were heavy and potentially explosive, but they made the bows truly independent weapons. Captain Jake Morrison arrived from Nexus Prime 2 days before the deadline. He had been monitoring Zephyrian fleet movements, and the news was not encouraging. High Commander Vextar had assembled 50 warships in nearby space, clearly preparing for Earth's refusal to accept vassalage. "They're not taking any chances," Jake reported to the assembled team. "If we say no, they'll be ready to demonstrate the consequences immediately." Elena looked at her exhausted team of archers. 7 people with experimental weapons against an alien empire. It seemed hopeless, but they had to try. "The plan is simple," General Cross explained. "Captain Morrison returns to Nexus Prime ostensibly to deliver our surrender. During the formal ceremony, you'll demonstrate humanity's new understanding of our place in the universe." Marcus Webb checked his temporal bow one final time. The weapon hummed with barely contained energy, and the neural interface felt warm against his forehead. Around him, 6 other archers made their own final preparations. "Remember," Amy Foster said, "this isn't about destroying their ships or killing their soldiers. It's about showing them that human primitive weapons aren't as primitive as they think." Susan Clark adjusted her quantum battery pack and tested the neural link connection. "What if it doesn't work? What if the temporal fields interfere with each other?" "Then we'll know we tried," Tony Rodriguez said grimly. "And maybe that's enough." Elena watched her team prepare for what might be humanity's last stand. The temporal bows represented everything she had learned about quantum physics and human ingenuity. If they failed, Earth would face conquest by an enemy that saw humans as nothing more than useful slaves. But if they succeeded, everything would change. The galaxy would learn that humanity's greatest strength wasn't advanced technology, but the ability to combine ancient wisdom with innovative thinking. The UES Meridian departed for Nexus Prime the next morning, carrying 7 temporal archers and the hopes of an entire world. Earth's fate now rested in the hands of people carrying weapons that shouldn't exist, guided by instincts older than civilization itself. The emergency session at Earth's Unified Defense Command had been going for 6 hours, and tempers were running high. General Nathan Cross sat at the head of the table, looking older than his 55 years. The news from Nexus Prime had reached Earth 3 days ago, and the world's leaders were still trying to process what it meant. President Martinez slammed her hand on the table, making everyone jump. 200 years of slavery. That's what they're offering us. 200 years? It's not slavery, Secretary of State Williams said quietly. They called it vassalage. There's a difference. Tell me the difference when human children are born into servitude. The president snapped back. General Cross held up his hand for silence. Fighting among ourselves won't solve this problem. We need to focus on our options. Defense Minister Chen from the Pacific Alliance leaned forward. What options? Our best weapons are useless against their technology. One of their ships could probably destroy our entire fleet. Then maybe we should accept their offer, suggested Representative Burton from the European Federation. 200 years is a long time, but it's better than extinction. The room erupted in angry voices until General Cross stood up. Enough. We have 27 days left to make this decision. I want every military researcher working on possible solutions. Deep beneath Colorado Springs, in a classified research facility, Dr. Elena Rodriguez was already working on exactly that. She had been studying the energy readings that Captain Morrison's ship had recorded during the meeting with the Zephyrians. The data showed something interesting about how their advanced technology worked. Elena called her colleague Dr. Kevin Murphy over to look at her computer screen. Kevin was a theoretical physicist who specialized in quantum mechanics and temporal studies. Together they had been trying to understand how the alien weapons and shields functioned. "Look at these energy patterns," Elena said, pointing to the screen. "Their shields and weapons all operate on stable temporal frequencies. It's like they exist in a slightly different time stream than normal matter." Kevin adjusted his glasses and studied the data. That would explain why conventional weapons can't touch them. If their shields exist a few microseconds ahead of our timeline, then bullets and missiles would pass through empty space. "Exactly," Elena said excitedly. "But what if we could create a weapon that operates outside normal temporal flow?" Meanwhile, in another part of the facility, archaeologist Dr. Amy Foster was having her own breakthrough. She had been called in to help analyze human military history and see if there were any lessons from the past that might help with the current crisis. Amy had spent her career studying ancient weapons and warfare. She understood how humans had survived and thrived using simple tools for thousands of years before modern technology. Something about the aliens' mockery of human primitive weapons bothered her. She walked into the main briefing room, carrying an old wooden longbow that she had borrowed from a museum. The military officers looked at her like she had lost her mind. "I know how this looks," Amy said as she set the bow on the table. "But hear me out. The aliens laughed at this weapon because they think it's primitive. But maybe that's exactly why it could work." Colonel Parker shook his head. "Doctor, with all due respect, a wooden bow isn't going to penetrate energy shields that can stop nuclear weapons." "You're thinking about this wrong," Amy replied. "Modern weapons rely on chemical explosions or electronic systems. But a bow is purely mechanical. It stores potential energy in bent wood and releases it through physical force. No electronics. No chemical reactions. Just physics." Dr. Elena Rodriguez had been listening from the doorway and walked into the room. She might be onto something. If we could modify a traditional bow to fire projectiles that exist outside normal temporal flow, it might bypass their defenses entirely. Kevin Murphy joined them and looked at the bow with new interest. The mathematics could work. Quantum entangled arrows that exist in temporal superposition until they reach the target. General Cross, who had just arrived from the meeting in Washington, looked skeptical. "You're talking about turning medieval weapons into science fiction." "Sometimes the oldest solutions are the best ones," Amy said. "Humans survived ice ages and natural disasters using simple tools and clever thinking. Maybe that's what we need now." Elena was already sketching equations on a whiteboard. "We would need to create arrows that could phase in and out of normal spacetime. The bow itself would need quantum targeting systems that could predict where the target will be across multiple timeline probabilities. The power requirements would be enormous," Kevin added, "and we'd need someone who could actually use the weapon effectively." Amy smiled. "I know just the person." 2 days later, Marcus Webb arrived at the Colorado facility. He was a former Olympic archer who now taught military marksmanship. Marcus had won 3 gold medals before retiring to train soldiers in advanced shooting techniques. He was skeptical about the whole project until Elena showed him the preliminary test results. The first prototype bow looked like something from a science fiction movie. The traditional wooden frame had been reinforced with carbon fiber and embedded with quantum processors. The arrows were made of a special metal that could hold quantum entanglement fields. "This is insane," Marcus said as he examined the weapon. "You want me to shoot arrows that don't exist until they hit the target?" "That's simplifying it a bit," Elena replied. "But yes, essentially that's correct." The first test was a disaster. Marcus drew the bow and fired at a target 50 meters away. The arrow disappeared completely and never reappeared. The quantum field had been too unstable to maintain coherence. "Back to the drawing board," Kevin muttered as they examined the failed equipment. It took another week of adjustments before they achieved their first success. Marcus fired an arrow at a target that was hidden behind a steel wall. The arrow phased through the wall and struck the target on the other side. Everyone in the testing facility cheered, but their celebration was short-lived. The next 10 shots all failed in different ways. Some arrows appeared inside solid objects and exploded. Others materialized in completely wrong locations. One arrow appeared 3 days late and nearly hit a janitor. "The targeting system needs work," Elena admitted. "We can create temporal arrows, but controlling where and when they appear is incredibly difficult." Marcus had been thinking about the problem from a different angle. You're trying to make this too complicated. Traditional archery isn't about complex calculations. It's about instinct and feel. He picked up one of the quantum arrows and examined it closely. What if the archer's mind could interface directly with the targeting system? Humans have been calculating arrow trajectories instinctively for thousands of years. Dr. Kevin Murphy looked interested. A neural interface that translates human intuition into quantum probability calculations. It's possible in theory. Amy Foster nodded enthusiastically. Archers don't think about wind speed and gravity in mathematical terms. They feel it. They sense where the arrow needs to go. Elena began working on a new design that would connect the archer's nervous system to the bow's quantum processors. It was dangerous and experimental, but they were running out of time. The modified bow was ready for testing with only 15 days left until the alien deadline. Marcus stood at the firing line wearing a neural interface headset that connected his brain to the weapon's systems. "Remember?" Elena said. "Don't think about the quantum mechanics. Just aim like you always have." Marcus drew the bow and felt something strange happen. He could sense multiple possible futures spreading out from the arrow's path. His mind automatically chose the timeline where the arrow would strike the target perfectly. He released the string and the arrow vanished. A split second later, it appeared embedded in the center of the target that had been moving on a random path. Marcus had hit a target that was in a different location when he fired than when the arrow arrived. "It works," Kevin said in amazement. "The neural interface lets the archer's intuition guide the quantum calculations." But they still had major problems to solve. Each shot drained enormous amounts of power from the facility's generators. The mental strain on Marcus was intense and left him exhausted after just a few arrows. They would need more archers and more efficient power systems. General Cross arrived for a demonstration with only 12 days left until the deadline. Marcus successfully hit 6 targets in a row, including one that was completely invisible to normal sensors. The arrows had found their targets across probability space. "How many of these weapons can you build?" the general asked. Elena looked tired but determined. "With our current resources, maybe 7 functional bows. We'll need a week to train enough archers to use them effectively." "And then what?" General Cross asked. 7 arrows against an alien empire." Marcus smiled grimly. "Sometimes that's all it takes. David only needed 1 stone." Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Meridian and watched the massive alien station grow larger on the main screen. Nexus Prime looked like nothing he had ever seen before. The station was huge and made of some kind of crystal that glowed with soft blue light. Ships from dozens of different alien races docked at its many arms that stretched out like the tentacles of a giant sea creature. Jake felt nervous, but tried not to show it. This was humanity's first real contact with other intelligent life in the galaxy. Earth had only developed faster than light travel 5 years ago, and humans were still new to space exploration. Most of the galaxy had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. Dr. Lisa Grant walked up beside him and looked at the screen. She was the ship's expert on alien life and had spent months preparing for this moment. Her hands shook slightly as she held her data pad. Next to her stood Commander Rick Hayes, who would help with the military side of the meeting. The communication system made a soft beeping sound, and Jake pressed the answer button. A voice spoke in perfect English, though it sounded strange and musical. The alien had learned human language from the radio signals Earth had been sending into space for decades. "Human vessel Meridian, you are cleared to dock at Port 7. Welcome to Nexus Prime." Jake took a deep breath and gave the order to dock. The ship moved slowly toward the station and connected with a soft thud. The crew had practiced this moment many times, but it still felt unreal. Within an hour, Jake and his team were walking through the station's corridors. The gravity felt normal, but the air smelled different. It had a sweet metallic taste that made Jake's nose tingle. The walls were covered in symbols that looked like art, but were probably writing in languages humans had never seen. Other aliens walked past them in the hallways. Some looked almost human except for their skin color or the shape of their eyes. Others were so different that Jake had trouble understanding how they could even move. One creature looked like a walking tree with silver bark and leaves that changed colors as it moved. They reached a large chamber where they were supposed to meet the Zephyrians. These aliens were the ones who had first contacted Earth and invited humans to this meeting. The chamber was enormous, with a ceiling so high that it disappeared into darkness above them. High Commander Vextar stood at the center of the room waiting for them. He was tall and thin, with skin that looked like it was made of blue crystal. Light seemed to come from inside his body and made patterns that moved across his surface. When he spoke, his voice sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Welcome, humans. We are curious about your species. You are very young compared to most galactic civilizations, but you have learned to travel between stars quickly. Jake stepped forward and tried to sound confident. Thank you for inviting us, High Commander. Earth is honored to meet with the Zephyrian Empire and learn about the galaxy. Vextar made a sound that might have been laughter. Learning is good. We have much to teach you. Please show us your military capabilities so we can understand how to best help you. This was the part Jake had been worried about. Earth's weapons were simple compared to what other races probably had. But they had to be honest about their abilities. Commander Hayes activated a holographic display that showed Earth's military technology. He started with their newest fighter ships that could travel at light speed and carried nuclear missiles. Then he showed their ground forces with automatic rifles and body armor. The Zephyrians watched quietly at first. But when Hayes showed traditional human weapons like swords and knives, several of them began making that wind chime sound. When he displayed an ancient longbow and explained how humans had used it for hunting and warfare for thousands of years, the entire group erupted in what could only be described as laughter. Vextar's crystal skin flashed with bright colors as he laughed. Primitive tool users. You still play with sticks and stones. How wonderfully simple. He gestured to his guards who activated their own weapons. Energy flowed from devices on their arms and created shields of pure light around their bodies. Then they fired beams of plasma that cut through thick metal targets like they were made of paper. These are real weapons, Vextar said. They can destroy your ships from distances your primitive minds cannot imagine. Your metal projectiles would bounce off our shields like raindrops. Jake felt his face turn red with embarrassment but kept his voice steady. We understand we have much to learn. Indeed you do, Vextar replied. Which brings us to why we invited you here. The Zephyrian Empire has a generous offer for humanity. The alien commander activated his own display showing a map of the galaxy. Hundreds of star systems were marked in different colors. The blue systems belong to us. The red ones belong to our allies. The yellow ones are neutral trading posts like this. Station. Jake could see that Earth's solar system was marked in white, which seemed to mean it belonged to nobody. We offer humanity vassalage under the Empire. Vextar continued. You will serve us for 200 standard years. During this time, we will protect you from hostile species and teach you basic technology. After your service period, we might consider granting you rights to colonize a few small worlds. Dr. Grant stepped forward. What kind of service would this involve? Mining mostly, Vextar said casually. Your species seems well suited for physical labor. You could also serve as soldiers in our less important conflicts. Nothing too dangerous. The words hit Jake like a punch to the stomach. They were offering humanity slavery disguised as protection. But Earth's weapons were useless against their technology. Humans would be helpless if the Zephyrians decided to take what they wanted by force. This is a very generous offer, Vextar said. Most primitive species are simply conquered. We are giving you a choice because we find your culture amusing. Jake forced himself to stay calm. We will need time to consider this offer and discuss it with our government. Of course, Vextar replied. You have 30 standard days to decide. If you refuse our generous terms, we will assume you prefer the traditional method of joining our empire. The threat was clear even though it was politely spoken. Submit or be conquered. The meeting ended soon after and Jake's team returned to their ship. Nobody spoke during the walk back. The corridors that had seemed exciting before now felt like the halls of a prison. Once they were safely aboard the Meridian, Jake called an emergency meeting with his senior staff. The news would have to be sent back to Earth immediately. Humanity had 30 days to decide between slavery and war, against an enemy they could not possibly defeat. As Jake stared out at the alien station, he wondered if this was how humanity's journey to the stars would end before it had really begun. The silence in the ceremonial chamber stretched on as the full implications of humanity's demonstration sank into the minds of every alien present. High Commander Vextar stood motionless, his crystal skin dim and flickering without the technological enhancements that had been part of his identity for centuries. Around him, the most powerful species in the galaxy stared at 7 humans with wooden bows and tried to understand how their entire worldview had just been shattered. Marcus Webb kept his temporal bow ready, but lowered it slightly in a gesture of controlled restraint. The neural interface still hummed in his mind, showing him probability streams that branched into thousands of possible futures. In most of them, this moment changed everything for humanity and the galaxy itself. Dr. Elena Rodriguez emerged from the Meridian's docking tube, carrying a portable computer and scanner. She had been monitoring the demonstration from the ship and recording every energy signature and quantum fluctuation. The data would prove that the temporal arrows weren't some kind of trick or illusion. The arrows operate by manipulating quantum probability fields, Elena explained to the stunned alien audience. They exist in superposition across multiple timelines, until the moment of impact when quantum observation collapses them into a single reality. Tall insectoid alien with compound eyes and clicking mandibles stepped forward. Ambassador Kethanar represented the Hive Confederation, one of the oldest and most respected civilizations in the galaxy. His species had been spacefaring for over 50,000 years and had seen the rise and fall of countless empires. This should not be possible. Kethanar clicked in perfect universal standard. Temporal manipulation on this scale requires technology that even our most advanced scientists consider theoretical. Susan Clark moved closer to the ambassador and held up one of her quantum arrows. The projectile shimmered with barely visible energy distortions that made it difficult to focus on. It requires understanding how time and space really work instead of just building bigger and more complex machines. Amy Foster, who had joined the delegation specifically for this moment, stepped into the center of the chamber. She carried an ancient wooden longbow that was completely unmodified by human technology. The contrast between her primitive weapon and the temporal bows was striking. For thousands of years, humans survived using tools like this, Amy said as she drew the simple bow. We learned patience, timing, and the ability to strike precisely. At the exact moment when our target was most vulnerable, she released an ordinary arrow that flew across the chamber and struck a small target with perfect accuracy. The shot demonstrated skills that had been refined over millennia of human evolution and practice. Your species focused on building better shields and stronger weapons, Amy continued. But you forgot that warfare isn't always about having the most advanced technology. Sometimes it's about understanding your enemy's weaknesses and exploiting them in ways they never expected. High Commander, Vextar finally found his voice again, though without technological amplification. He sounded weak and uncertain. You deliberately concealed this capability during our first meeting. You made us believe you were primitive and helpless. Captain Jake Morrison stepped forward to respond. We were primitive and helpless by your standards. 30 days ago, these weapons didn't exist, but you made one critical mistake when you dismissed humanity based on our apparent technological inferiority. What mistake? Vextar asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. You gave us 30 days to think about the problem, Jake replied. Humans don't react well to ultimatums, and we have a long history of finding unexpected solutions when our survival is threatened. Marcus Webb activated his neural interface and began demonstrating the temporal bow's more advanced capabilities. He fired arrows that split into multiple projectiles across different probability timelines, striking several targets simultaneously. Another shot curved around obstacles by taking detours through folded spacetime. The most impressive demonstration came when he fired an arrow at a moving target that was completely invisible to normal sensors. The projectile appeared to know exactly where the target would be several seconds in the future and materialized at precisely the right location and time to intercept it. The targeting system interfaces directly with human neural patterns, Elena explained. Our brains evolved to calculate trajectory timing and target prediction for thrown and fired projectiles. This natural ability combines with quantum processors to create targeting accuracy that no artificial intelligence can match. Tony Rodriguez demonstrated this by firing with his eyes closed at a target that was moving in a completely random pattern. His arrow found its mark perfectly because his subconscious mind could process quantum probability calculations faster than any computer. Ambassador Kethanar clicked his mandibles in what might have been admiration or concern. You have created weapons that combine your species' evolutionary advantages with advanced quantum physics. The implications are staggering. The chamber's communication systems, which had been broadcasting the ceremony across the galaxy, suddenly came alive with incoming messages. Alien civilizations that had been watching the demonstration were desperately trying to understand what they had witnessed and what it meant for the galactic balance of power. A representative from the Stellar Collective, a peaceful alliance of scientific species, requested permission to examine the temporal bow technology. The warlike Crimson Horde demanded to know if the weapons could be mass-produced. Even the mysterious Shadow Syndicate that rarely communicated with other species sent encrypted queries about possible technology-sharing agreements. High Commander Vextar looked around at the chaos his failed demonstration had created and realized that everything had changed. The Zephyrian Empire's dominance was based on technological superiority that had just been proven obsolete. Other species would now question whether the Empire's protection was worth the cost of vassalage. "What do you want?" Vextar asked Jake Morrison. "You have demonstrated that our weapons cannot protect us from yours. Are you here to conquer the Empire?" Jake shook his head. "We want what we asked for 30 days ago. Recognition as an independent species with full rights to explore and colonize the galaxy. No vassalage, no servitude, and no demands for tribute." "That is impossible," Vextar protested weakly. "The Galactic Order requires structure and hierarchy. Primitive species cannot be allowed to develop freely without proper guidance." Marcus Webb drew another temporal arrow and let quantum energy crackle visibly around its tip. "We're not primitive anymore, Commander, and we're not asking for permission." Dr. Elena Rodriguez activated her scanner and pointed it at the Zephyrian warships visible through the chamber's transparent walls. "Your fleet's shields operate on the same temporal frequencies as your personal defenses. Our arrows can penetrate them just as easily." The threat was clear without being spoken. 50 Zephyrian warships might be able to destroy Earth, but they couldn't protect themselves from weapons that operated outside normal spacetime. The humans had achieved the impossible by making their entire fleet obsolete, with 7 modified bows. Ambassador Kethanar stepped between the two groups and spoke with the authority of someone who had witnessed the rise and fall of galactic empires. "Perhaps it is time for new solutions to old problems. The Galactic Council should consider humanity's application for full membership." The suggestion sent ripples of shock through the assembled aliens. Full membership in the Galactic Council was reserved for species that had proven themselves capable of contributing to galactic civilization. It usually took thousands of years of gradual advancement and careful evaluation. "They have been spacefaring for less than a decade," protested a reptilian ambassador whose species had waited centuries for council recognition. "Yet they have just revolutionized warfare and proven that innovation matters more than age." Kathnar replied, "Perhaps we should be learning from them instead of teaching them." Over the following hours, as news of the demonstration spread across the galaxy, humanity's status changed completely. Species that had never heard of Earth suddenly wanted to establish diplomatic relations. The temporal bow technology remained classified, but everyone understood that humans had somehow turned their greatest weakness into an overwhelming advantage. Captain Morrison found himself negotiating treaties and agreements with civilizations that had existed for millions of years. The terms were far better than anything humanity could have hoped for just days earlier. Earth would become a protected research world where temporal weapons development could continue, under strict ethical guidelines. Marcus Webb and his team of archers became instant celebrities, though they preferred to focus on training the next generation of temporal bow users. The weapons were too dangerous and mentally demanding for mass production, but a small force of expert archers could protect human interests across the galaxy. Dr. Elena Rodriguez established the Temporal Physics Institute to study the implications of her discoveries and develop new applications for quantum time manipulation technology. Scientists from dozens of species applied to work with her team, eager to understand how humans had achieved the impossible. High Commander Vextar accepted the new reality with as much grace as he could manage.